What if I told you that one of the most indestructible animals to ever walk the earth wasn't a predator at all? In fact, it couldn't even run away from danger. Yet it survived for over 30 million years in one of the deadliest periods in history. Today we're diving deep into the incredible world of the Ankylosaurus, the living tank that rewrote the rules of survival. And trust me, what scientists discovered about this armored giant in recent years will completely change how you think about dinosaur defense systems. Let's get into it. Picture this. 68 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period, North America was a war zone. Tyrannosaurus rex ruled the landscape. Packs of velociraptors hunted in coordinated attacks, and massive crocodile relatives lurked in every river. This was nature's ultimate proving ground. And right in the middle of all this chaos waddled an animal that looked like someone strapped medieval armor to a turtle and gave it a sledgehammer for a tail. That animal was Ankylosaurus magniventris, and it was absolutely brilliant at staying alive. Now, before we go further, I need you to do me a favor. If you're enjoying this journey back in time, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which prehistoric creature you want me to cover next. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and I read every single comment. All right, let's talk about what made Ankylosaurus so special. First, let's address the armor. When paleontologists first started studying Ankylosaurus fossils in the early 1900s, they thought the bony plates, called osteoderms, were just for protection. Simple, right? Wrong. Scientists didn't expect what they found next. Research published in recent years using advanced CT scanning technology revealed that these osteoderms weren't just random chunks of bone. They were arranged in an incredibly sophisticated pattern, with different shapes and sizes working together like a biological suit of chainmail. The larger keeled plates ran along the spine and hips, while smaller rounded plates filled the gaps. This created a flexible yet nearly impenetrable defense system. But here's where the story gets even stranger. In 2023, researchers examining fossilized Ankylosaurus skin impressions made a shocking discovery. The osteoderms weren't smooth. They were covered in a network of tiny blood vessels. This means the armor wasn't just dead bone sitting on top of the skin. It was living tissue, constantly being maintained and repaired by the animal's body. Think of it like your fingernails, except these fingernails could stop a T-Rex bite. The implications are massive. This living armor could heal from damage, adapt to injuries, and possibly even grow thicker in response to repeated attacks in high-risk areas. Now let's talk numbers. An adult Ankylosaurus measured approximately 6 to 8 meters long, that's about 20 to 26 feet, and weighed somewhere between 4 and 8 tons. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the weight of 2 modern elephants. But unlike elephants, which are tall and relatively slender, Ankylosaurus was built low and wide, like a biological tank, with a center of gravity so low it was nearly impossible to flip over. And that design was absolutely intentional. Most people have this completely wrong when they imagine how Ankylosaurus moved. Popular media often shows them as slow, clumsy creatures, barely able to drag themselves forward. But biomechanical studies from the past few years paint a very different picture. While Ankylosaurus certainly wasn't winning any sprint races, it was far more mobile than previously believed. Analysis of the hip structure and leg bones suggests these animals could move at a steady walking pace of around 4 to 6 kilometers per hour, and potentially reach speeds of up to 10 kilometers per hour in short bursts when necessary. That's about the same speed as a human power walking, Not impressive by predator standards, but remember, this animal didn't need to run. It just needed to not get eaten. And that brings us to the most famous feature of Ankylosaurus, the tail club. This weapon, called a knob, was formed from several osteoderms that fused together into a massive bony mass at the end of the tail. The largest tail clubs discovered measure over half a meter wide and could weigh up to 30 kilograms. That's about 66 pounds. Imagine swinging a bowling ball at the end of a flexible pole, except the pole is made of interlocking vertebrae specifically designed to generate maximum force. Scientists have calculated that a full force swing from an adult Ankylosaurus tail club could generate enough impact force to shatter bone. We're talking about over 7,000 newtons of force, equivalent to being hit by a small car traveling at 20 kilometers per hour. But here's the fascinating part that recent research uncovered. The tail wasn't just a random weapon that Ankylosaurus swung wildly, hoping to hit something. Studies of the vertebrae structure show that the tail had remarkable flexibility in the horizontal plane, meaning side to side, but was very stiff vertically. This design meant Ankylosaurus could aim its strikes with precision, targeting the legs of attacking predators. And the evidence backs this up. Paleontologists have found T-Rex fossils with healed leg injuries consistent with impact trauma from a blunt object. While we can't prove those specific injuries came from Ankylosaurus, the timing, location, and injury pattern all line up perfectly. Now let's rewind to the beginning of an Ankylosaurus life, because that's where things get really interesting from a survival perspective. Like modern reptiles, Ankylosaurus hatched from eggs. Fossil evidence suggests they laid clutches of perhaps 10 to 20 eggs at a time, though exact numbers remain uncertain because complete nests are incredibly rare in the fossil record. What we do know is that baby Ankylosaurus faced an immediate problem. They were born with soft, relatively thin armor that wouldn't fully harden and thicken for several years. During this vulnerable period, young Ankylosaurus had to rely on camouflage, hiding, and staying close to adults for protection. Scientists believe that Ankylosaurus may have exhibited some level of parental care, or at least herd behavior, where adults would defend young animals. This theory gained support from fossil discoveries in Montana, where multiple Ankylosaurus individuals of different ages were found in relatively close proximity, suggesting they may have lived in loose family groups. This social structure would have been crucial for the survival of juveniles, giving them time to develop their defensive capabilities while protected by the herd. As young Ankylosaurus grew, their armor thickened gradually. Research on bone growth patterns suggests it took approximately 15 to 20 years for an Ankylosaurus to reach full adult size and maximum armor thickness. During this growth period, the osteoderms would continuously expand and fuse, creating an increasingly formidable defense system. The tail club also developed gradually, with the individual osteoderms at the tail tip slowly fusing together over many years. Younger individuals had smaller, less effective clubs, which meant they had to rely more heavily on their body armor and group protection. Let's talk about diet, because what an animal eats tells us a lot about how it lived. Ankylosaurus was an obligate herbivore, meaning it ate only plant material. But it wasn't a picky eater. Examination of the skull structure and tooth wear patterns reveals that Ankylosaurus had a relatively weak bite force compared to other herbivorous dinosaurs. The teeth were small and leaf-shaped, designed for cropping vegetation rather than grinding tough plant material. This suggests that Ankylosaurus primarily fed on soft, low-lying plants like ferns, cycads, and early flowering plants that were abundant during the late Cretaceous. Here's something most people don't know. Ankylosaurus had a remarkably wide skull, measuring up to 60 centimeters across in large adults. But this width wasn't just for armor. The broad muzzle allowed Ankylosaurus to take large mouthfuls of vegetation in a single bite, making feeding more efficient. Think of it like a biological lawnmower, clearing wide swaths of plants with each pass. To sustain their massive body weight, adult Ankylosaurus would have needed to consume enormous quantities of plant matter daily, possibly upwards of 100 to 200 kilograms, depending on the nutritional content of available vegetation. That's roughly 220 to 440 pounds of plants every single day. But here's where the story takes another fascinating turn. Recent chemical analysis of Ankylosaurus fossils has revealed something unexpected about their metabolism. For decades, scientists assumed that all dinosaurs were either cold-blooded like modern reptiles or warm-blooded like modern birds and mammals. But evidence now suggests many dinosaurs, including Ankylosaurus, may have had a metabolism somewhere in between, a condition called mesothermy. This middle ground metabolism would have allowed Ankylosaurus to maintain a relatively stable body temperature without burning through calories as quickly as a fully warm-blooded animal. This would have been a huge advantage for an herbivore that needed to maximize energy efficiency while carrying around several tons of armor. Now let's address one of the biggest questions about Ankylosaurus. How did they deal with overheating? Carrying that much armor in the warm Cretaceous climate seems like a recipe for heat exhaustion. Scientists were puzzled by this for years, until recent discoveries provided some answers. Those blood vessels running through the osteoderms we mentioned earlier, they weren't just for maintaining the armor, they also served as a thermoregulation system. Blood flowing through the plates near the surface of the skin could release excess heat into the environment, similar to how elephant ears work. Additionally, the nasal passages of Ankylosaurus were unusually complex, with elaborate turbinates, bony structures inside the nose. These structures would have increased the surface area for heat exchange during breathing, helping cool the animal down with each exhale. Let's talk about senses, because surviving in the Cretaceous required more than just armor. Analysis of Ankylosaurus skull anatomy revealed some surprising capabilities. The eye sockets were positioned on the sides of the head, giving Ankylosaurus excellent peripheral vision. This wide field of view meant they could detect predators approaching from almost any angle without turning their head. However, like many prey animals, they likely had limited depth perception directly in front of them. The brain case, preserved in some fossil specimens, shows that Ankylosaurus had relatively large olfactory bulbs, the parts of the brain responsible for processing smell. This suggests that scent was probably their primary sense for finding food and detecting danger. Hearing is harder to assess from fossils, but the presence of well-developed ear structures suggests Ankylosaurus could hear reasonably well, particularly low-frequency sounds like the footsteps of approaching predators. Imagine being an Ankylosaurus. You're grazing peacefully when you catch the scent of a T-Rex on the wind. Your peripheral vision picks up movement in the trees. You hear the deep rumble of footsteps getting closer. Your brain processes all this information in seconds. Do you run? No. You plant your feet, lower your body to protect your vulnerable underside, and prepare that tail club for a fight. This is survival through intimidation and preparedness. Speaking of T-Rex, let's address the ultimate question. Could Ankylosaurus actually defend itself against the most powerful predator of its time? The answer, according to modern science, is a resounding yes. Biomechanical models show that the Ankylosaurus armor was thick enough to withstand even a T-Rex bite on the back and sides. The osteoderms on the back were often 5 to 8 centimeters thick. That's 2 to 3 inches of solid bone covered by tough skin. A T-Rex had one of the most powerful bites in history, capable of generating up to 57,000 newtons of force. But that force was concentrated on the teeth, and those teeth would have struggled to penetrate the layered defense of Ankylosaurus armor. But here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists didn't expect what they found next when they started running computer simulations of Ankylosaurus versus T-Rex encounters. The models showed that if Ankylosaurus could land a solid hit with its tail club on the leg of an attacking T-Rex, the impact could easily cause a fracture or severe injury. And for a predator as large as T-Rex, a broken leg was essentially a death sentence. Unable to hunt, unable to compete with other predators, a T-Rex with a leg injury would likely starve. This means that attacking an adult Ankylosaurus was an incredibly risky proposition for even the most powerful predators. The risk-reward calculation simply didn't favor the predator. This defensive strategy is called making yourself too expensive to kill, and it's found throughout nature. Think of porcupines, armadillos, and turtles in the modern world. These animals don't need to win fights. They just need to make the fight so costly that predators decide to look for easier meals. Ankylosaurus perfected this strategy to an art form. Recent fossil evidence even suggests that Ankylosaurus may have had another defensive trick up its sleeve, or rather, under its armor. Some specimens show evidence of air-filled chambers within certain osteoderms, similar to the hollow bones found in birds. These air pockets would have reduced the overall weight of the armor without compromising its strength, making Ankylosaurus slightly more mobile while maintaining maximum protection. Evolution really thought of everything. Now let's talk about the environment Ankylosaurus lived in, because understanding the habitat helps us understand the animal. During the late Cretaceous, North America was split by a massive inland sea called the Western Interior Seaway. Ankylosaurus lived on the western landmass in what is now Montana, Wyoming, and Alberta, Canada. The climate was warmer and more humid than today, with lush forests of conifers, ferns, and flowering plants. Rivers and floodplains were common, providing abundant vegetation and water sources. But this paradise came with a price. It was absolutely packed with predators. Fossil evidence shows that Ankylosaurus shared its habitat with not just T-Rex, but also smaller tyrannosaurs, various species of raptors, and massive crocodile relatives that could reach lengths of over 10 meters. The skies were patrolled by giant pterosaurs with wingspans exceeding 9 meters. This was not a safe neighborhood. Yet Ankylosaurus thrived in this environment for millions of years, outlasting many other species that came and went during the same period. Their success was a testament to the effectiveness of their defensive adaptations. Before we continue, if you're still watching, thank you. Seriously, it means a lot. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. We post new animal science videos every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. We've got some mind-blowing content planned. All right, let's keep going. One aspect of Ankylosaurus biology that doesn't get enough attention is reproduction and mating behavior. While we don't have direct fossil evidence of mating rituals, scientists can make educated guesses based on anatomy and comparisons with modern animals. The tail club, while primarily a defensive weapon, may have also played a role in intraspecific competition, meaning fights between Ankylosaurus individuals. Males may have used their clubs to compete for mates or territory, engaging in ritualized combat where the goal was to demonstrate strength without causing serious injury. This behavior is seen in many modern animals, from deer to tortoises. The presence of sexual dimorphism, differences between males and females, in Ankylosaurus remains debated. Some fossils show variation in tail club size and armor thickness, which could indicate males and females, or could simply reflect individual variation and age differences. What we do know is that Ankylosaurus, like all dinosaurs, laid eggs. The eggs would have been relatively large, perhaps 20 to 30 centimeters long, and required warm, moist conditions to incubate properly. Females likely buried their eggs in vegetation or sand, relying on environmental heat rather than body heat for incubation. Here's something that blows my mind. Every Ankylosaurus that ever lived started as a tiny hatchling, no bigger than a house cat, completely vulnerable, and had to survive long enough to grow into a multi-ton armored fortress. The mortality rate for young Ankylosaurus was probably extremely high, with predators, disease, accidents, and environmental factors all taking their toll. Only the lucky, the smart, and the well-protected made it to adulthood. But those that did became virtually untouchable. Let's talk about something that recent research has shed new light on. How did Ankylosaurus actually use that tail club in combat? For years, scientists debated whether the tail club was even practical as a weapon. Some argued it was too heavy to swing effectively, or that Ankylosaurus couldn't generate enough force to make it dangerous. But advanced biomechanical modeling has put those doubts to rest. The key lies in the specialized vertebrae at the base of the tail. These vertebrae were partially fused and reinforced with ossified tendons, creating a stiff handle that could transfer force efficiently from the powerful tail muscles to the club at the end. When Ankylosaurus swung its tail, it wasn't using just the tail muscles. The entire body acted as a counterweight, with the animal pivoting on its hips to generate rotational force. Think of it like a baseball player swinging a bat, except the bat is attached to your spine and weighs 30 kilograms. The motion was likely a rapid side-to-side swing, targeting the lower legs of attacking predators. The club would have made a distinctive whistling sound as it cut through the air, possibly serving as an auditory warning to predators. Back off or face the consequences. Fossil evidence of healed injuries on Ankylosaurus tail clubs suggests these weapons saw regular use. Some specimens show fractures and deformities that healed during the animal's lifetime, indicating they survived encounters where the club took significant damage. This tells us that Ankylosaurus weren't just passively defended. They actively fought back when threatened, and they survived those fights often enough to heal and fight again. Now let's address one of the most common misconceptions about Ankylosaurus, that they were solitary animals. For decades, this was the prevailing theory, based on the fact that most Ankylosaurus fossils are found individually rather than in large groups. But recent discoveries have challenged this assumption. In 2022, paleontologists in Montana discovered a bone bed containing remains from at least 5 different Ankylosaurus individuals of varying ages, all preserved in the same geological layer. This suggests they died together, possibly in a flood or other natural disaster. The presence of multiple age groups in the same location supports the theory that Ankylosaurus lived in small family groups or loose herds, at least part of the time. This social structure would have provided significant advantages. Multiple adults could watch for predators from different directions, creating a defensive perimeter. Young animals could learn feeding locations and defensive behaviors from experienced adults. And during mating season, having multiple individuals in the same area would increase the chances of successful reproduction. It's a strategy seen in many modern herbivores, from elephants to bison. And it makes sense that Ankylosaurus would have evolved similar behaviors. Let's talk about what happened to Ankylosaurus, because their story, like all dinosaur stories, ends with extinction. 66 million years ago, an asteroid approximately 10 kilometers wide slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs, triggering global wildfires, tsunamis, and a prolonged impact winter where dust and debris blocked out the sun for years. Photosynthesis stopped. Plants died. Herbivores starved. And the predators that depended on those herbivores followed them into extinction. Ankylosaurus, despite all its incredible adaptations, couldn't survive this catastrophe. No amount of armor could protect against global environmental collapse. The fossil record shows that Ankylosaurus was one of the last surviving ankylosaurs, persisting right up until the extinction event. They were successful until the very end, which is more than can be said for many dinosaur lineages that disappeared millions of years earlier. In a way, Ankylosaurus won the evolutionary game. They just happened to be playing when the board was flipped over. But here's the beautiful part. The legacy of Ankylosaurus lives on in modern science and culture. Every fossil we discover adds new pieces to the puzzle of how these incredible animals lived. Advanced technology like CT scanning, computer modeling, and chemical analysis continues to reveal secrets that were locked in stone for 66 million years. We now understand that Ankylosaurus wasn't a slow, stupid, passive tank. It was a sophisticated, well-adapted survivor with active defenses, social behaviors, and remarkable biological innovations. The story of Ankylosaurus teaches us important lessons about evolution and survival. Sometimes the best defense is a good defense. Sometimes being slow and steady really does win the race, or at least keeps you alive long enough to pass on your genes. And sometimes the most intimidating animals aren't the ones with the biggest teeth or the fastest speed. They're the ones that make attacking them a really, really bad idea. Today, we can see echoes of Ankylosaurus in modern armored animals. Armadillos, with their bony plates, are like tiny mammalian ankylosaurs. Tortoises carry their armor everywhere they go, sacrificing speed for protection. Pangolins have scales that can stop predators and even deflect bullets. The evolutionary strategy that made Ankylosaurus successful 68 million years ago is still working today in animals around the world. Armor works, defense works, and making yourself too expensive to kill is a valid survival strategy. As we wrap up this journey into the world of Ankylosaurus, I want you to think about this. Right now, under the ground in Montana, Wyoming, and Alberta, there are Ankylosaurus fossils that haven't been discovered yet. Each one holds secrets about how these animals lived, how they grew, how they fought, and how they survived. Future paleontologists, using technologies we can't even imagine yet, will continue to unlock those secrets. The story of Ankylosaurus isn't finished. We're still writing it, one fossil at a time. If you made it this far, you're awesome. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you rather have the armor of an Ankylosaurus or the speed of a velociraptor? I'm genuinely curious what you'd choose. And if you learned something new today, share this video with someone who loves dinosaurs as much as you do. Knowledge is meant to be shared, and every share helps this channel grow. The Cretaceous period ended 66 million years ago, but the legend of Ankylosaurus, the living tank that refused to be anyone's lunch, lives on forever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.